Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Parr, and on this episode of Math Up to Par, we are going to be talking about representing fractions. So let's talk about what a fraction is. So a fraction is any amount less than one whole or one unit. So sometimes we have parts of one and we need to show those parts. Like if you have one whole sandwich, but you cut that sandwich into 2 pieces or 4 pieces, you need to be able to use something to represent the amount that is. So that's why we use fractions and decimals to represent those amounts. So when you see a fraction, you will see a line in the middle, which is our dividing line, and we have something called the numerator, which is the number on the top, or the denominator, which is the number on the bottom. And sometimes you might notice, if you see 3/4, you might notice that it's also written 3/4. Sometimes when we're typing, like if I were to type 3/4 right here, I would type and I'd say, okay, 3/4, and I'd use that slash. That represents a fraction just like this. So this is 3/4, this is 3/4, this is 3/4. This slash right here is just what we hit on our keyboard, and that's our dividing line, and that separates the numerator and the denominator. So when you see it stacked on top, the numerator is the top number. You see it left to right, the numerator is the number on the left, and the denominator is the number on the right, and this one is on the bottom. So I just wanted to show you those. The numerator is going to show how many parts we have, the number of parts that we're counting, the number of parts that are being represented, and the denominator is the number of equal parts that it's divided into. So if I have this shape right here, I have this square, and it's divided into 4 smaller squares, 4 equal squares. Okay, so the denominator right here is 4. There are 4 total pieces. They are each equal to one another. If they're not equal, then it's not a true fraction. The numerator is 3. So if I were to shade in 3/4, I would shade in 1, 2, 3 pieces right here. And now this fraction represents 3/4 because I have 3 parts filled in and then 4 total parts. So when we're looking at fractions, we see them represented in several different ways. One of the main ways that we see fractions are these area models. A lot of times we see those circles broken up into pieces and some shaded in, some not. So when we look at these, we think fractions most of the time because that's what our experience is with a lot of them. But these are called area models. So in this area model right here, I have 6 total pieces. So that's going to be my denominator. And I have 5 pieces shaded in. The number of parts that I have shaded, that is my counting piece. So I have 5, 6. So this fraction right here represents 5, 6. In this circle, I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then another 6 on this side, which makes 12ths. And I can see that 6, 7 of those are shaded in. So the total number of pieces is my denominator, and then the number of pieces that we are counting that are present or that we're representing, that's the numerator. So I have 7 out of 12, so 7/12. And then this rectangle down here, there are 4 equal parts, and one of them is shaded in. So this fraction would be 1/4. My 1 would be in my numerator, and my 4 would be on my denominator. Another fraction, another way to represent fractions is through a set model. So in this situation right here, we have 8 items, okay? And we have some suns and we have some moons. So if we were representing the amount of moons, well, first let's count the total. We have a total of 8 shapes right here. 2 of them are moons. So I could say 2 out of 8. 2 is my numerator because that's how many moons there are, and there are 8 total. 2 8ths are moons. But then there are 6 suns, so I could also say that 6 eighths are sons. So depending on what you are counting, that's your numerator. Okay, that's the piece you're looking at. So 2/8 are moons and 6/8 are suns. Down here, we have some shading in. So we have 3 total triangles. So we would put our 3 as our denominator, and we have 1 shaded in. So my numerator is going to be 1/3 shaded, but I could also represent a fraction for the part that's not shaded. So I could say 2 out of 3, or 2/3 is not shaded, or I could just say the white triangles, the ones that are not colored in. So now number lines. Okay, number lines can look really scary and confusing, but we use them for a lot of different things in math, and they can be really helpful. So fractions can be represented on a number line, and you can represent whole numbers, fractions, decimals, all kinds of things. So let's look at the information that we've been given, and let's just look at this first number line for now. So I'm going to cover up the other ones. All right, so when I am just looking at this number line, I see that this number line starts at 0 and it ends with the whole number 1. So everything in between is going to represent a value that's in between the numbers 0 and 1. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a line on top to connect these pieces and underneath. This is not something you have to do, but it helps me to visually see that now I have these rectangles, okay? And so I'm going to count this as 1 rectangle, 2 rectangles, 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. So what this tells me is that this number line is divided into 6 equal pieces between 0 and 1. So that means that each one of these points, these lines, represents 6. I'm going to go ahead and take these lines off now. So that means that this one whole can also be called 6, 6. And if this is 6, 6, then 1 less is going to be 5, 6. 1 less will be 4, 6, then 3, 6, then 2, 6, then 1, 6. And this 3, 6 right here, 3 is actually half of 6. So 3, 6 is equal to 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1/2 up here too. That goes with this line. So maybe let me drag that over. And we can actually simplify the 2, 6 and the 4, 6 as well, but we will talk more about that in some other fraction videos. So let's go ahead and let's label this next number line. So I don't have the number 0 listed, but I do have the numbers 1 and 2 listed. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to connect these pieces, and that's going to help me look and see how many parts I have between the 2 whole numbers. Okay, it doesn't have to be between 0 and 1, but it has to be between 2 whole numbers. So I see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Okay, so that means that each one of these parts is fourths. Okay, so 1 whole would be equal to 4 fourths. So if this is 4 fourths, then less than it would be 3 fourths, then this would be 2 fourths, this would be 1 fourth, and this right here would be 0 fourths. And we know that 0 fourths is really just 0. Now, between 1 and 2, we're now going to have a whole number plus a fraction with it. That's what we call a mixed number. So now I would have 1 and 1/4, 1 and 2/4, 1 and 3/4, and when I would get here, it'd be 1 and 4/4. Well, that 4/4 turns into another whole number, so that's why we get 2, and then we would continue that pattern on. 2/4 can be simplified into 1/2, and over here as well, so this would also be equal to 1 and 1/2. So anytime my numerator is half of my denominator, that's equal to 1/2. If that doesn't make too much sense to you right now, don't worry about that too much. We're going to talk more about that, especially when we talk about equivalent fractions. So let's go ahead and look at this last one. Now this number line starts with a 2, but that's okay. It doesn't have to start with 0. Sometimes we just see a little snippet of a number line, and what we know about lines with geometry is they continue on and on and on forever in both directions. So this arrow tells me it goes less than 2, and this arrow tells me it goes way past it. So here I have 2, here I have 3. So I'm going to connect my lines, and I'm going to see All right, there's only 2 pieces in between, and when I have 2 pieces, those are called halves. So that means that in between these 2, I would have 2 and a half. Well, then I have 3. A half more would be 3 and a half. Then 1 half more would be 3 and 2 halves, which is the same thing as 4. And then I have 4 and a half. And then I have 4 and 2 halves, which is the same thing as 5. So this pattern goes 2, 2 and a half, 3, 3 and a half, 4, 4 and a half, 5. Okay, so we used all these different ways to represent our fractions, okay? And fractions represent values that are smaller than 1 whole. So this is our numerator and this is our denominator. Our denominator is the total number of pieces and the numerator is the parts that we are counting. So thanks so much for listening and happy practicing. Bye.